Okay, my name is Yisrael Killian, but my name has not always been Yisrael Killian. I came from a Catholic background, raised in California. My mom married a Catholic, and we were raised as Catholics. And after high school, I left home and went into the military. And in the military, I spread my wings a little bit. And there was a church next door on the base to the Catholic Church, a Protestant church. I always wondered what's going on inside that building. So I went to explore the Protestant church, and I was in the Protestant church. I really enjoyed it, had a lot of fun there, and was there for quite a while. And after this service, I came out and started my own business, and I got married in the Christian church. We had 6 children together, me and my first wife, and it was a very passionate time in Christianity. I was one of these Bible thumpers. I was one of these guys who would go out street preaching and took it very seriously. Anytime the church doors were open, I was there. I was very enthusiastic. And the reason I was is because I always believed it was the truth. But I stumbled across some shirim on the internet. How did that happen? Well, before my mom passed away in 1998, she told us that she was Jewish. But because there was we couldn't prove it because her mother was no longer alive, and there was nothing on her kever that said that she was Jewish. And there was doubts, but I didn't know the significance of that. And I started learning with my brother. My brother started hooked up with Chabad, and he was learning at an amazing rate. And I also decided I wanted to learn. And my brother gave me a big box of cassette tapes of Rabbi Akiva Tatz. He says, well, if you really want to learn, you got to listen to this guy. And you got to listen to him about 50 times before you have a clue what he's talking about. And I started listening, and he gave a shiur on David and Bathsheba that absolutely shook me to the core, positively shook me to the core. And I knew from this shiur I needed to hear more. I needed to study more. I needed to dig more. And I found another shiur on the internet by Rabbi Nathan Lopez Cardozo, and he gives a shiur on the mice of David and Bathsheba that's out of this world, completely out of this world. And I knew I couldn't go to church anymore. And we started off small. We started going to the Messianic Synagogue, which is basically a church that meets on Saturday. Really not much difference, just a lot of Jewish trappings. And about 1999, we were a little concerned about Y2K and living in California, so we decided to move. And we found ourselves in Linden, Tennessee, a small town in Tennessee between Nashville and Memphis, because some friends of ours from California had also moved there, and we kind of followed them. And you've heard of the Bible Belt. Well, where we were living in Tennessee, it was right on the buckle. And when I started to talk to my neighbors and friends about what I was learning from the rabbis, it really caused an uproar. And basically the whole town turned against me. And my wife told me, I had to leave. I came home one day and all the locks were changed, and I was given an order to stay away. And it broke my heart. It was very devastating. But I knew from those shiurim that I'd listened to, I knew that only the possessors of Torah Sheba'al Peh have the emes. That's what I learned. The real emes doesn't come from the Bible. All these religions have the Bible, but that's not what makes us Jewish. What makes us Jewish is what's in the hearts and minds of the Talmidei Chachamim. That's what makes us Jewish. And I knew at that point I had to learn from the rabbis. And I was all on my own. I was driving a truck at the time. I was doing a dedicated run, first stop in going from Tennessee to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, second stop in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I was locked out of my house 4 days before the September 11th bombings in New York. And it was a Tuesday morning on September 11th. I was in Allentown on my regular run. A week or two later was Sukkot, however long it was. And I found myself in Allentown, Pennsylvania for Sukkot, for the last days of Sukkot. I called my boss. I said, I'm shutting down the truck. I'm off the air for 2 days. And there was a synagogue there in Allentown, Sons of Israel. And I showed up at the shul as a broken, lonely man who's been told to stay away. But I knew I had to search. I knew I had to draw close to the Jewish people. And I remember my first experience in an Orthodox synagogue on Shabbos or Yom Tov. I'd been during the week, but this was my first experience on Shabbos or Yom Tov. During the davening on Shmini Atzeres, the man behind me tapped me on the shoulder. He says, "Do you have a place to eat yet?" And my mouth dropped open. I said, "No." He says, "Good. You can eat with us." And I was flabbergasted. After davening, they walked me home. They seated me at this large Yom Tov table with their entire family, treated me like one of their own. Then in the afternoon, we came back for the davening of Mincha for Shmini Atzeres and the beginning of Simchas Torah. And after Mincha, there was a young mother there with twins in the stroller. And she walked up to me and she said, where are you staying for Yom Tov? She knew I was new. And I just put my head down. I said, "Well, I'm staying in my truck." "In your truck? You can't stay in your truck over Yom Tov." I said, "I can't?" She says, "No, we got plenty of room." They walked me back to the truck to get my stuff. I'd already turned off the lights. We walked back to the house, seated me to a beautiful Yom Tov meal. They showed me up to my room. There's a large room with a large bed overlooking the street. And my own private bath. And I'm going to tell you, this is from my heart. I literally felt like I was going to sleep in Hashem's arms that night. Here, my own beloved wife of 12 years and 6 beautiful children gave me an order to stay away. And here, this couple has their hands full with brand new twins. And then I'm some itinerant truck driver. And they said, "You can't stay in your truck over Yom Tov?" I was just like totally blown away. There is no other nation like Am Yisrael. So I'm going to jump forward real fast to about a year ago. A year ago, I'm living in Lakewood now, and it was Shmini Atzeres. No, it was Erev Shmini Atzeres, and we had already davened Mincha, and we're waiting for the time to daven. And Rabbi Simcha Bunim Cohen, where I go to shul in Lakewood, he got up to speak, and he says, "Do you understand what today is? We're about ready to start Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres is a very special time for the Jewish people. This is a time where Hashem sends everybody else away and says, 'Stay with me one more day. Stay with me one more day. I just want to be with you. It's special, just between me and you.'" And Rabbi Cohen was saying, you can daven for whatever you ask for, anything you need. This is a time that Hashem is close to us. The next morning, Simchas Torah, I was walking to shul, thinking about what he said the night before and thinking, wait a minute. It was Shmini Atzeres when I met that couple and they gave Erev Simchas Torah, where they gave me a place to stay and a meal to eat. And I felt that night that I was going to sleep in Hashem. I wasn't making that up. I really was going to sleep in Hashem's arms that night. All the words that Rabbi Cohen was saying about that particular Shmini Atzeres was going back to approximately 10 years earlier in 2001 when I had experienced this. And I knew from that there was no other nation like Am Yisrael. And I knew that Hashem was drawing me close to Him. And I've learned so much from these shirim that are posted on the internet that I started my own website, Torah Media Atlanta. And I want to give back to other people the opportunity to learn the shirim that I learned and that are produced every day throughout the world. Let's talk just a little bit about some of the ordeals that I went through. My ex-wife really put me through the ringer. We know that Avram Avinu went through the Kivshin Shalesh, and we know that's what made him Avram Avinu. And I went through my own Kivshin Shalesh. It was unbelievable. The false accusations, the lies that she would tell about me, drag me into court, try to keep my children away from me. It was absolutely gut-wrenching. I remember being in a Shabbos table in Pittsburgh, as a matter of fact. After Shabbos, the Rebbitzin was sweeping the floor after the meal, the day meal, and she says, I stand in awe of you. I said, you stand in awe of me? I haven't done anything. I'm staring right at Emmis in the face. How can I turn my back on Emmis? One time I had gone to go pick up the kids. It was Homo et Sukkos. And all I wanted was to be with my kids here in Atlanta on Simchas Torah. And I went to Linden, Tennessee to pick up my kids. And when I arrived at the house, she refused to let me have the kids, said I didn't have a court order, which I did. And she pulled a gun on me. And I said to her, do you really think I'm afraid you're going to shoot me? Mother shoots children in front of father. No, shoots father in front of children. Film at 11. I said, just call the police. The police got there and they said, well, do you have a court order? I said, well, I don't have it with me. And he said, well, it's your word against hers. Meanwhile, I go into town, try and get this worked out. And lo and behold, the judge never signed the order. So I have no proof what the judge said. It's a small town. Realize there's only 2 traffic lights in the entire county. Okay? They make up their own rules. And they were going to get rid of this Jew boy as fast as they could. So when I went to town to try and find this document that said I had visitation, she with her friends came to town also and filed charges against me. Said I was criminally trespassing. Said I broke down her door. I did nothing of the sort. I drove out of town to where my car was, and a friend of mine gave me a ride. And just then, one of her friends showed up, and she says, we got it all worked out. Everything's fine. We got the order. Everything's worked out. Come back into the town. Come into the courthouse, and you can pick up the kids. I'm thinking, is this a trick? So I went, and I walked up to the top of the stairs. And as I got to the top of the stairs, old courthouse building, 2nd floor, I saw my ex-wife and her friend and talking to the clerk. And the clerk had just gotten on the phone. And he says, he just walked in the building. We've got an arrest warrant for criminal trespassing. I heard that. I ran down the stairs. I jumped in my car and headed for the hills. I had to take the back roads out of the town. I couldn't take the main highway because the cops were going to be looking for me. I don't know how I made it. I went through dirt roads, backwoods, any way I could find to get back to the interstate. I finally got back to the interstate. I didn't have a cell phone. This was a while ago. I got back to the interstate, and I called my rabbi, and I was bawling my eyes out. And he says, get back to Atlanta as soon as you can. So I got back to Atlanta, and I had made up my mind, and I'll have to give credit to Rabbi Fischel Schachter from his shirim that he recorded for the Chavetzheim Heritage Foundation. He gave me the koach. I made up my mind. Because of his shirim, I made up my mind, you know what? I don't have my kids for Simchas Torah. No. But I refuse to be sad on Simchas Torah. This is our Chag. And I'm going to pick up other people's children and put them on my shoulders and carry them around the bema. From Rabbi Schachter telling about the times in Auschwitz where people refused to get down and refused to give up. And they were going to be b'simcha no matter what was going on around them in the world. I am so proud to be part of the Jewish people. And one of the best shirim I've ever learned, I'm a big fan of David HaMelech. And David HaMelech's yichus comes right from this week's Parshas Vayeira. In Parshas Vayeira, by Parshas Kiseitse, it says that no one from Moab can join Klal Yisrael because they can't come out to greet you with bread and water. So no one from Moab is allowed to marry a regular Jew because they didn't come out to greet you with bread and water. And according to Megillas Rus is from Moab. So how was she mutzer to Boaz? We've got a pasuk. What more do you need? You're not fit. Well, Chazal say because the Torah specifically gave us the reason why they were usher. Because they didn't come out to greet you with bread and water. And the Chazal say it's not sneas for a woman to come out and greet strangers. Therefore, this gezerah against Moab didn't apply to the females, but only to the males. So from where do we learn? Where do the Chachamim learn that the sneas, that it's not sneas for a woman to greet strangers? And the answer is in this week's Parsha, in Parshas Vayeira, where 3 Malachim came to visit Avram. One had the mission of refuah, to heal from the breast. Another had the mission of telling Sarah the good news she's going to have a son, Yitzhak. But the third Malach, what was his job? His job was to destroy Sodom. Well, if you only have one mission, and your mission is in Sodom, Sodom's that way. Why are you socializing at the Seudah? Get to work. I'm not paying you to sit around. And another question that's always bothered me. These 3 Malachim, 3 complete strangers, show up at Avram's house, and what's the first question out of their mouth? Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha. Where is Sarah, your wife? What kind of question is that? Think about it. 3 strange men show up and say, where's your wife? You know, cluck them. It's none of your business. But I'm here to tell you, this question, Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha, is one of the most important questions that has ever been asked in all of human history. And I'm not overstating it. If anything, I'm understating it. So why is the angel there? And why are they asking about his wife? Because they had a Shiloh. What's the Shiloh? The Shiloh was Lot. The question was, do we save Lot or do we not save Lot? Why is that a question? Well, if we save Lot, then he's going to be in the cave with his daughters, and that's going to bring Moab into the world, and Moab is going to bring Ruth into the world. But if Ruth is not going to be mutter to Boaz, why do we need to save Lot? We need to know, should we save Lot? Well, what's that dependent on? It depends. Is Ruth going to be mutter? Well, what's that dependent on? Well, it depends. Is it proper for a woman to go out and meet strangers? What's the proper conduct for a woman? Should a woman go out or should a woman stay inside? Well, how do we know that? Well, we go to the gadol door and ask for a Pesach din. So they come to Avram Avinu very subtly as strangers, as guests. He brings them bread and water, and then they say, Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha. This was not a social question. They wanted to know the din. What's the way of a woman? Is a woman expected to go out and greet strangers, or is it not considered proper? Is it not considered modest? Now, if we understand the question, for sure Avram understood the question. What does he say? Hinei ba'ohel. She's a snuas. Go save Lot. Ruth is legitimate, and David is legitimate. What do we learn from this? David's entire legitimacy is traced to the snua of Sarah Imenu. Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha Vayomer Hinei ba'ohel. Now, in Shmuel Navi's day, this question still was a big machlokas, very big. Doeg Hadomi came back and said, no, he's usher. David's from Moab. Moab is usher. Big machlokas. So they wanted a final psak. So they wrote to Shmuel Navi and asked for a final psak. So Shmuel Navi wrote a 4 parakim tshuva on this very question of the yichus of David coming from Rus. And we had that tshuva with us to this very day, believe it or not. The name of that tshuva is called Megillas Rus. Now, we just said, follow with me, we just said that we know that Ruth was mutter to Boaz because she's a female, because Sarah stayed in the tent. In other words, you can't punish Ruth for not coming out since Sarah didn't come out. And we also said that Shmuel wrote the Megillah to answer the question. So we should be able to learn from the Megillah that David's yichus is validated from Sarah. Well, if you look inside the Megillah, every pasuk in the entire Megillah begins with a vav. Throughout the whole Megillah. Except 8 pasukim. Only 8 pasukim don't start with a vav. What are those 8 letters? Yud, Shin, Ayin, Yud, Yish-I, my salvation. Base Aleph, Hey Lamed, Ba'ohel. Yish-I, Ba'ohel, my salvation is in the tent. Shmuel Navi coded into Megillas Rus the fact that David's legitimacy goes all the way back to Sarah. Now we could ask the question, why so much complications with David? Why couldn't he just be born from a normal father and a normal mother? Done. And why do we need these rabbinic gymnastics? If David is Ruth's mutter, if David is kosher, why do we need to code it in? Ayeh Sarah Shecha Vayomer Hinei ba'ohel. Just tell us outright. What do we need these rabbinic gymnastics for? The answer is so geschmack. This was Hashem's little insurance policy that we as a nation would hold on tenaciously to our Masorah. Why? Because Hashem made the yichus of the Melech, listen to this, dependent only on our Masorah. So if a king would come along and say, you know what? We don't need the Chachamim. We don't need the Torah Shabbat Peh. We'll just go with the Bible. Oh, really? We've got a Pusik. We've got a Pusik. You're not fit, David. We only learn from our Masorah that David is mutter, that Ruth was mutter to Boaz, and that David was allowed to be, come into the claw and to be the king of Israel. There's a very interesting pasuk, unbelievable pasuk, in Tehillim. But before I tell you that pasuk, the most common phrase in all of Chumash, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. So the Vilna Gaon asks, why do we say Vayidaber and lemor? Say Vayidaber or say lemor. Why do we need both? Says the Vilna Gaon, the Vayidaber is Torah Shabbat. The lemor is Torah Shabbat Peh. Now we look into the phrase coded into Megillas Rus one more time. Again, Yish-i Bo'hel, coded into the Megillah. Clearly it's a remez back to Sarah. But now let's look at a pasuk from Tehillim, Kuf Yud Tes, the longest parak in the whole Tehillim. If you go to the shins, it follows the aleph base. If you go to the pasukim for the letter shin, first pasuk says, Sarim Rudefuni Hinam U Midvarcha B'chad Libi. Princes or officers pursued me, and I was afraid of your word. I was afraid of Torah Shabbat. Who are these officers? Who are these princes who were pursuing him? Doeg and Achitophel, who kept casting aspersions on his yichus, based on the pasuk from Kisetse. No one from Moab can join Klauswa. And he was afraid. But the next verse says, Sas anoki al imrasecha kamotse shalora. I rejoice at your lemor. I rejoice at your Torah Shabbat Peh, which teaches me that I am kosher. At first I was afraid. After all, he had a pasuk, and he was a chacham. Maybe David was unfit. But the next verse says, I rejoice at your lemor, at your Torah Shabbat Peh. Now we look one more time at that phrase coded into Megillas Rus, and with this I'll finish. The phrase coded into Megillas Rus, Yish-i Bohel, my salvation is in the tent. Clearly that's a remez back to Sarah. But this is so geschmack, based on what the Vilna Gaon says about this pasuk from Tehillim, Kuf Yud Tes, what does Yish-i Ba'ohel refer to? My salvation is in the tent. Ohel Sheli Toro. Ohel Sheli Yaakov. It's not enough that Sarah was sneas. You also have to have the Chachamim in the base Midrash to bring it out. Aye Sarah Shtachah Vayomer Hine Bohel. Yish-i Bohel. That's why it's coded in, to make sure that we hold on tenaciously to our Masorah. So take that with you with this week's Parshas Vayeira, and realize that the yichus of David HaMelech is right there in this week's Parsha, Aye Sarah Ishtecha. Thank you very much.